Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next live stream. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight and taking some time out of your schedule to learn a bit about vacuum tables. And yeah, we're excited to be here. Thanks for joining again. Tonight's topic is going to be Spoilboards and how to use them on an AirWeights Workholding System. So we're going to demonstrate some of the different use cases that we have for that and show you some tips and tricks about how to get the best work holding for your setup. We are also going to announce a new product that we just came out with, and that'll be exciting. So stay tuned for that later in the show. We'll do our standard question and answer session, a live Q&A to answer all of your questions about the AirWeights Workholding System and make sure that you have what you need for your setup and for your given parts. We do have a sale that we're going to announce as well, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And of course, at some point in the show, we'll do a giveaway and we'll have a hashtag. It should be a pretty fun night, and then we'll wrap up at the end. So right off the bat, I'm actually going to share with you what the details of our sale is. So sale is now active. So at any point during the show, if you're interested in something, go check it out on the website. The discount code is VAC4DAD. So this is in honor of Father's Day. I'm a father myself. If my kids are watching, hi kids. Yeah, I think Father's Day is like a pretty important holiday for our community. I just want to acknowledge all the dads out there and say good on you. And yeah, so if you type in VAC, VAC4, the number 4, DAD, you'll get 15% off your entire order. And that's going to go from right now through all the way through Father's Day until next Monday at midnight Pacific, just to give you a little bit extra time. So yeah, 15% off. If I didn't say that, sorry. But yeah, so if you're interested in purchasing an AirWeights system, this is a really great time to do that. And just wanted to highlight that. So we're going to dive right into some of the content that we have planned for tonight. And the big topic, like I said, is Spoilboards. So I guess the first place that I want to start with this is, what is a Spoilboard? And this term has gotten a little bit blended in the CNC space quite a bit, but in essence, a Spoilboard is a sacrificial piece of material that you put between your workpiece and your machine table so that when you cut all the way through your part, you don't cut into your machine table, you cut into a Spoilboard, you cut into this sacrificial surface. And the most common material for a Spoilboard is MDF. It's because it's got pretty good material properties, relatively dimensionally stable for a wood product. It's consistent thickness, it can be machined pretty easily. So there's a lot of factors that have sort of led to that. And one of the most important factors as it relates to our conversation tonight is that MDF is actually porous, and it's consistently porous. So in other words, if you place a piece of MDF onto one of our work holding systems and you turn on the vacuum pump, air will be pulled through the sheet of material, and you'll end up with a little thin layer of negative pressure right on the surface of the MDF. And that property, that piece of information is extremely key to leveraging your vacuum table as best as possible. So that's what a Spoilboard is. We sell Spoilboards, and they're a 1/4 inch thick from us. They're pre-cut and routed to the profile of your AirWeights vacuum table, and we sell them for each size that we offer. They come with locating holes and locating slots pre-machined into the Spoilboard so that if you wanted to use it as sort of a dedicated fixture or make the same cut in the same place repeatedly, you could. And that's a nice little feature that we have. And one of the most important things that I want to highlight about our Spoilboards is the specific material that we use. So the truth is that not all MDF is created equal. In fact, there are a variety of different MDFs out there intentionally to give people options for different applications. So you have, your ultralights, regular old MDF that you'd buy at the hardware store. you have HDF, and you have all sorts of different varieties within those densities to choose from. And the most important thing for the AirWeights Workholding System when it comes to MDF is that you find the right density of material. We've had a lot of customers purchase MDF themselves, and because places like big box stores don't have very consistent control over the material they're getting, we have people who have success and people who don't, just because they get the wrong density of material for our system. So the magic number that you're shooting for is 48 pounds per cubic foot density. And one way to check that is simply weighing your material. You can take your piece of material, you multiply length with height, you get the volume, you put it on a scale, you know the weight, then you can calculate the density pretty easily. So that's an easy check just to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting. We've had customers also that have sought out the correct material, were told they were sold the correct material, and were not. So just be aware that the density of the material for our applications really, really, really does matter. And again, it's 48 pounds per cubic foot that you're looking for. The material that we make our Spoilboards out of is called Medex. It's from Roseburg Forest Products. It's a West Coast outfit. They do have distribution across the US, but it seems a lot easier to find in the West than in the East. And so because there's sort of a limited supply of a material that we know works very well, we bring it in and we sell it to any customer that wants it, just to provide that service. It doesn't really pay the bills, but it helps out you guys with getting the right material for our system. And so that's why we're doing that. So yeah, Medex MDF, if you can find it. If not, come check us out. If you have any issues with finding the right material, email us. You can try weighing it. It's a good little hack. But generally, you're looking for a higher quality of MDF with a tight control on the density in the 45 to 48 pound range per cubic foot. So I want to talk now about how to prep a Spoilboard for the AirWeights Workholding System. So it's pretty common knowledge in the vacuum table space that it's good to do some things to your Spoilboard. And I'm going to go through all of those things now so that you have an idea of how to approach a Spoilboard when you get it for the first time. So the first thing I'll say is that our Spoilboards that we sell to you will work as delivered. You don't need to do these extra steps. You could take a Spoilboard that we sell, put it right on the vacuum table, and it'll work hold for you. Within the given constraints of MDF as a work holding method, down drafting as a work holding method. But these are best practices, especially if you're sourcing your own MDF or you're sourcing thicker MDF, which is also an option for our products. So the first thing that you want to do when you're preparing a Spoilboard is you want to seal the edges to prevent unnecessary leaks out of the edge, or prevent vacuum pressure or pressure equalization sort of jumping the seal through the material. So the very first thing that we recommend is that you take something like wood glue, sanding sealer, shellac, spray-on poly, anything that'll seal the surface. Some people use wax. And you seal a 1-inch border around the perimeter on the bottom side of your piece of MDF. Most of our Spoilboards, all of them, this is a factory second, but all of our Spoilboards are marked with a stamp to let you know which side to put down. And that's simply due to the nature of 1/4-inch material. Sometimes it tends to cup or warp a little bit. We always want to put that concave side down against the vacuum table to force a seal at the corners and the edges. But your first step is to seal that perimeter around the outside, and then also seal the edge. With thicker materials, this becomes more important. With 1/4-inch material, there's such little surface area around the edge compared to a 3/4-inch material that you have much less leak rate through the edge, and this is another reason why 1/4-inch material is nice. But at the end of the day, you're sealing the edge and you're sealing a 1-inch border on the bottom so that the seal that's installed in our system contacts the sealed area on the vacuum table. That's the goal, forcing all of the air to come through the top surface and not just coming in through the edge. So that's the first step. Second step you'll do is you'll place this on your vacuum table. You'll turn on your vacuum pump, and you'll face it minimally. You'll take a fly cutter or a surfacing bit or a slab slayer or whatever you want to call it, and you'll take off the minimum amount of material that you can while still making sure you contact everywhere. And I say minimum because the idea here is, if you take a lot of material off one side of a sheet good, it tends to want to bow in that direction. And you flip it over and you have to, you're playing this game battling the thicknessing back and forth. And if you can just take off the minimum amount, you can minimize any sort of bowing or cupping. And the same thing applies for fixture plates, another product of ours when you're prepping those. You want to just face off the minimum amount that you can. And the primary reason that we recommend that with our products, despite the fact that they're extremely consistent and the thickness is very, very even and consistent across the entire sheet, is just that if there's any error in your installation, in the vacuum table, in your bed, in your tramming or whatever, if you face the top surface of your MDF spoil board, you machine out any area or any error that's present, leaving you with a really well trammed machine relative to the surface that you just cut. So it dials in your Z heights very, very precisely. And so that's the next thing. And then the other thing to note is just maintaining the orientation that you faced your piece of MDF in. So, that's another nice feature about our spoil boards is with the locating holes and slots, say you machine out the error by facing it, but then you rotate it 180 degrees and put it back on, you just negated the validity of your facing operation if you were really trying to dial in your Z heights. So keep that in mind, that maintaining the orientation can be a really nice tip if you're super, super tightly trying to control your Z heights for a given machining application. If you don't really care about how much you're cutting through and you really are using this as a spoil board, you're cutting through by 40 thou at a time or something like that, and you're just doing through cuts, it's not that big of a deal. But if you are doing tight tolerance work, that's a key. And that same thing would apply to fixture plates as well, maintaining that orientation. So that's spoil board prep. You're sealing the edges and a 1-inch border on the bottom. You're facing minimally, about 0.010 of an inch, just barely skimming it off, taking off the minimum amount you can while still machining the entire surface. And then you're looking to maintain the orientation of that spoil board once you've prepped it. And hopefully it just lives on there until you need a new one and it's wasted. That's another note is spoil boards are a consumable item. You're going to machine into it over and over and over again, and then eventually you're going to want to face it, get those machining marks out, and then start over. The accuracy of your depth, your cut depth control, can really prolong the service life or longevity of your spoil board. So say you're cutting into your material and you're cutting through by just bare like 0.005 of an inch every single time. Those little ridges that are formed are not going to contribute significantly to any vacuum loss. But if you're cutting through by 40 thou each time and then you got to go face that, with a 1/4-inch spoil board, that's not going to last very long. So, maintaining an accurate cut depth and really understanding your stock thickness is a really, really great thing to get into the practice of doing when using AirWeights or any vacuum system for that matter, or any CNC for that matter. It's a good practice to make sure you know exactly where you're at and you're getting complete through cuts, clean cuts, but not, excessively taking material out of your spoil board for no reason. So another quick tip for you. So I want to transition now to talking about some of the approaches for using a spoil board on the AirWeights Workholding System. And so behind me, just like the rest of our live streams, I've got Tom. This is our second Onefinity Elite Journeyman. Huge shout out to Onefinity. We love these machines. They work awesome. And we're going to take you through all 4 of the vacuum tables that we have set up as independent zones on our Elite Foreman here, Tom. And we'll go through a spoil board just by itself, a bare MDF spoil board, and what kind of capability you can expect from that. We'll go through using gasket on top of a spoil board and what you can expect when you add a little bit of gasket material on top of the spoil board in terms of work holding. We'll go through tile gasket and what you can expect from a work holding perspective and how to prep that and what materials it's appropriate for. And then finally, we'll go into our new product launch and talk about repeat locating. We'll actually talk about repeat locating on a Spoilboard, which is a common question of ours, and then also repeat locating with our new product that we're going to announce. So let's jump right in. I'm going to set up this Spoilboard that I've been holding here. And for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to place it on position 1, which is the front left of the CNC. I could do it with pins, but it's kind of unnecessary for the demo. If you ever do place with pins, you just put them diagonally across from each other, one in one corner, one in the other, and then place the Spoilboard right on top. So let's place this on here now. I'm looking for any concavity. I think it's pretty darn flat. And we'll place this here. And I am actually going to bring the camera a little bit closer. I know one of the pieces of feedback that we have is get a second camera angle, and we will. But let's talk about this for a moment and come along for a ride with me. So you can see here that I've got my machine set up. And again, we've got bare Spoilboard, a Spoilboard with one of our nested gasket squares, just a continuous piece of onboard gasket with a 1/2-inch width. And I think this is about a 7-inch square. The tile gasket back left, and then a bare vacuum table back right, which we'll talk about later. So I'm just going to turn on my vacuum pump now, and you'll hear it kick on. And right away, I can tell just by looking at the gauge down here that we're pulling deep vacuum. This is our 17 CFM pump hooked up right now. And I can feel air pulling on my hand when I place my hand on here. And I can also tell that this is under vacuum because I can't move the Spoilboard. And so when you're using a bare Spoilboard on a vacuum table, the key thing that you need to remember is you don't have anything trapping the air underneath the part. It's just basically the intimate contact between the surface and the material that's holding it in place. So things to remember are that the material needs to be smooth, it needs to be flat, and it needs to be non-porous. The other thing is that anywhere you're not covered, you're leaking. You're allowing air to pass through, and that work that the vacuum pump is doing is not going into work holding. It's just leaking to atmosphere. So I'm actually going to take a piece of material, and this is a piece of just Medex MDF. It's a little bit sealed on the backside, but if I place this on here right now just by itself, it holds a little. You can see me pushing on it. But if I really push, I can get it to slide. Now, depending on your machining application, that could be sufficient. But given that this part is about 8 by 10, it's not really enough surface area to work with this type of vacuum work holding approach. So let me slide that off. And then I have a piece of 12 by 24 non-porous plastic material. If I put that on here, you might even hear the tone of the vacuum pump change. And this, I cannot move. I mean, it is fully on there. And that's because of the additional area that we have to work with here. This is a smooth surface. It's non-porous. It does not pass air. And the MDF is in such intimate contact with the material that it's actually creating a seal. And because I'm covering up so much of the surface area that's being utilized by the vacuum pump and activated, the vacuum reading actually goes to a deeper vacuum when I put this on. The other unique thing about a bare Spoilboard is you can burp the seal extremely easily by just lifting up on the corner. So if I just take my finger and I burp the seal over here, I can get that right off. But if I place it down and I try to push laterally, it's extremely rigidly held. So, another thing that you could demonstrate here is by showing, okay, if I cover up half of my Spoilboard and I get more effective vacuum in a particular area, being this front portion here now, and I take that same part I had before and place it down, the work holding strength is a little stronger here because I've isolated vacuum to my leaking area to a smaller section of the Spoilboard. So a little bit hard to demonstrate effectively without metrics, but that's the idea. Is if you have areas on your spoil board that are you're not using, you're cutting something smaller, you can section off areas or cover up areas to maintain a good seal. So I'm going to shut the pump off for a second here, and pressure will equalize. And I can take these parts right off. So that's kind of a bare spoil board. You can cut large parts that are flat, non-porous, and that have nice, smooth surfaces directly on an MDF spoil board like this. So contrast that with taking the same, very similar, it's the same material, same spoil board, and just putting a piece of gasket on it. Now this is one of our onboard gasket squares, and all it's doing is now preventing the negative pressure that's building up inside this little volume here from escaping so quickly. And it allows a larger pressure differential to build up within this little volume as opposed to outside the seal where it's leaking. So let me just adjust my manifold, and I'll turn the pump back on. And I can hear that we're pulling deep vacuum. I'm going to give it a second just to let vacuum build up within the MDF. MDF is kind of like a capacitor. And then if I take that same piece of material I was working with before, that kind of slides around on here, and then I put it on this with a gasket and let go, now extremely rigidly held. I cannot move that at all. So just by adding a little bit of gasket material on the top of the MDF, you can achieve extremely rigid work holding and isolate a little custom vacuum pocket per project. Some things to note is if you're going to cut through with this type of approach, you'd want to cut through outside of the seal that you left on the vacuum table. If you did cut through on the interior, you would expect to breach that little vacuum pocket, and you'd want to account for that somehow in your gasket approach. So let's say I had a hole somewhere in the center here. Let's say I had a hole right in the center. I just want to put a little bit of gasket around where I'm going to cut through so that the vacuum pocket is isolated for that given part. But if you're just cutting through on the profile or doing a quick setup for engraving or something like that, this is a really clean and simple approach. And you'll notice that even though we're leaking around the bulk area of the spoil board, because we're sealing off the region underneath the part, we're still able to generate a very high pressure differential relative to a spoil board by itself. So super quick and easy, really great approach for getting something done quickly. If you're having trouble or it's not a sheet good, say you're cutting a hardwood board, something like that, it really allows you to very quickly improve your work holding to have either a roll of our onboard gasket or some of our nested gasket squares. So really quickly, I'm going to pull you back here, and I'm just going to show you what our nested gasket squares look like. They're available on our website. And we call them nested gasket squares because they are a die-cut set of squares that are all a 1/2 inch wide, and they're a 1/16 thick. And they are nested so that you can have all these different sizes for given projects that you're working on. So, an outer dimension of 12 by 12, 11 by 11, 10 by 10, 9 by 9, and so on, all the way down to, I think, 4 is the smallest. And this is an extremely affordable gasket solution to have in your arsenal and just keep around for both fixture plate work. If you wanted to have a quick and dirty setup for a fixture plate, pop a hole in the center of that region, and you have incredibly rigid work holding. Or if you're working on a spoil board and you're struggling to get something to hold, you can just slap that thing down and should have no problem holding it then. So really, really quick and efficient way to set up for a gasketed solution on top of a spoil board or on top of a fixture plate. I'll also take this opportunity to just mention All-Star CNC products. If you haven't checked out All-Star CNC products, I highly recommend it. They're one of our partners, and They also sell our products, but we provide, all of their gasket solutions. They make stuff for the CNC router industry, and they've been doing it for a long time. They know their stuff. They know CNCs really well. And this is one of their products that's also offered by them. If you're using it in volume, definitely check them out. Same thing with any tile gaskets that you're looking to buy in greater volume. Always check out All Star CNC. We love those guys. So that's our nested gasket squares. If you're looking to pick those up, check out the Father's Day sale that we talked about. Discount code for those of you who are just joining. We're running a Father's Day sale now through next Monday. And the discount code is VAC4DAD, VAC4DAD. There we go. Ticker on the bottom of the screen for you. So that's the nested gasket squares. You could also use onboard gasket on top of the Spoilboard in the same way that the gasket square is put down. Say you had a funky shape for your finished part, some cutting board template or some more organic kind of flowy shape. You could just lay down gasket in the rough sort of dimensions of your piece, and then just cut it out as long as that gasket stays inside anywhere that you're cutting through on the profile. So very, very efficient way to do things. The next thing I want to talk to you about is using a Spoilboard with tile gasket on top. So tile gasket is that perforated foam rubber back there. It's an adhesive backed sheet. And the best way to use tile gasket is very similar to how you would use a bare Spoilboard, but it allows you to cut smaller and smaller parts because of the way that it works and how it functions. So basically what tile gasket does is it seals off the vast majority of the surface area on top of your MDF. And so you're already reducing your leak rate significantly. And that means that the pressure difference goes up. So you get higher pressure difference, more work holding force. And it's isolated to all of these little perforations, these 1/4 inch holes that are all over the gasket material. When you place a piece of material on that, each one of those holes becomes this sort of like super suction port and pulls the material down. So if your material is flat, non-porous, like if you're processing melamine or sheet goods or something like that, tile gasket will allow you to cut smaller and smaller parts and still maintain effective work holding. So again, if you're going to use tile gasket, make sure you prep your Spoilboard. That's sealing the bottom, 1 inch border around the outside, sealing the edges, facing it, maintaining your orientation, and then adhere the tile gasket to the top surface of your MDF Spoilboard. Then your part sits right on top of that. And again, this is where having very precise depth control is super important. You want to make sure that when you cut through, you're cutting through as minimally as possible to give you a clean cut, but just barely skimming the surface of the tile gasket so that you can preserve the service life of that material. It's not cheap, and it's also not, it's a consumable, but it's not meant to be consumed every single time you run a part. You want to prolong the lifespan of that material to give you as many cuts out of it as you can. So accurate Z height control, one way to do that is, I think All-Star says you can, put your part down, touch off on Z, measure the thickness where you touch off, and then cut. And if you have an onion skin left over, or maybe you can also like bias so that you do have an onion skin intentionally, and then you can measure the thickness of your onion skin and go 5 thou deeper just to make sure you get through, but you're not cutting in too much. So that's one way. A few other ways you can estimate compression and kind of know for a given part, but generally, you can either experiment or you can know with very, very clear certainty using a pair of calipers the exact thickness of your material, right where you're going to touch off and measure with your CNC tool. So that's probably the number one recommendation. So I'll just quickly show a demo of tile gasket. This has been covered before, but the key thing here is just you want to use consistent, flat, smooth sheet goods. That's when this stuff really shines. Same thing with a bare Spoilboard. You want to make sure that you're using consistent, flat, smooth sheet goods. And tile gasket will also help account for some of the surface irregularity within that, which is nice if you have something that's not perfectly flat. Like if you're cutting birch plywood or something like that. On a bare Spoilboard, you'll have a lot harder time than on tile gasket, just because it can fill into the grain of the wood and kind of account for some of the grain or surface irregularities or scratches or things like that. So let me change my manifold. I'll show you just from here this time. So I'm going to adjust. I'm going to turn on my back left position. I'm going to shut off everything else. And if I turn this on, right away I'm getting deep vacuum. And if I put my hand on here, I can feel the little holes sucking on my hand. And, again, like you put something like this on here, there's no way you can get that off. It's extremely rigidly held, but I can burp the seal. Laterally, it's extremely strong. On the edge, if I lift, I can peel it off. And then, ideally, if you're cutting something smaller, you would cover up a portion and then take your workpiece and put it on there. And I'm not touching that back zone, just for those of you who can't see. I'll let that equalize, push down a little, and then that thing is on there. So, isolating flow to the workpiece that you're using in question, making sure it's smooth, flat, and non-porous. In this case, it even is porous, but this will give you very, very rigid work holding and allow you to cut smaller and smaller components without losing them on your vacuum table. So let me shut the pump off. The other key thing that I want to mention is that vacuum tables were originally developed for processing sheet goods. So big industrial router, a huge multi-hundred CFM blower somewhere, and just pulling a ton of air. And that's because you don't really care about the ultimate pressure difference so much, because you have so much area on these huge parts, cabinets and doors and stuff, that just a little bit of pressure difference will achieve very, very rigid, strong work holding. And so, a bare Spoilboard will do the job in many cases, but as things have gotten more intricate and more complicated and people are pushing their machines more, that's where something like tile gasket really comes into play, to give you the ability to do smaller and smaller parts without needing some other custom setup or making a jig or something like that. So really incredible product, creates very universal work holding, and is a much stronger work holding approach than using a bare Spoilboard, hands down. So that's tile gasket. And again, if you're looking to pick some up, now's a great time to do that. And yeah. So I want to talk briefly about a new product that we're launching. We've been teasing this, I think, like Kate, our ops manager, was giving me flack because I think I've been teasing this for like 6 months now. But we finally have our own hard stops for repeat locating on our vacuum tables. So we have designed these little parts. Some of them in the past were we had different versions, but this is a completely CNC machined anodized aluminum little locating piece, and it fits around the squares in our vacuum table and nests into the grid and has a bull nose that's a 1-inch offset from any given square that you wrap this little U shape around. If you flip it over around the square, the little zeros indicate a 0-inch offset, allowing you to pass gasket through the channel in front of it. So 2 different orientations you can use it in. If you go to our website and go to the second page of our products, you can see it listed at the very last product there. So this is how you have it. This is how you would have it set up on your machine. They nest perfectly and fit snugly into the grid and provide a stable, reliable stop to push material against, so that you can either square your material relative to your vacuum table, or you can provide an XYZ position and get a very stable position over time if you're running the same part over and over again. So those are our new hard stops. We sell them in a few different quantities there, just to emphasize that you need 3 to set up a part appropriately. And there's been some great work done out there by people in our community making their own versions of this. But we wanted to offer something to those people who just are ready for a solution to buy off the shelf. So super excited about these. We have a limited quantity right now, not a huge run for the first bit, just to see how they sell. But excited to have these available. And gosh, they came out so sweet. Really, really happy with the turnout. So I'll bring you over to the machine now and show you how you would set that up. We've shown this a couple times in the past, but just to give another idea, I think Brandon was asking about a visual for the tile gasket. So you can see here how I set up. There's a gap back here, but it's just, tile gasket on top of a piece of MDF and the workpiece here. So transitioning over to this setup, this is what we would call direct mounting, where your workpiece sits directly on top of the vacuum table. And we made this part in a different live stream a while back. I'm going to actually take that off. And you can see that I just have a zone made around this open vacuum port with grid gasket. So this has no adhesive on it, and it just nests into the channels in the vacuum table and pushes down. You want to make sure that you seat it all the way down and it's sitting down in the channel contacting the very bottom. You also want to make sure that your splices are clean, perpendicular cuts, and that they have a tiny bit of compression or are sitting extremely flush to try to minimize leaks at these junctions. You'll also see that every single one of my other vacuum ports is plugged, including this corner touch plate feature. Don't forget that. That's a common thing. But every single other one is plugged, and I always feel weird asking people if they've plugged this one, but I hope, just please remember to do that. It's a common thing to forget. Anyway, so we have a little sealed zone here, and these hard stops provide a repeat location that I can put my workpiece on and put it in the same spot every time. So if I place this on here and I pull down, I get the translation in one direction. And if I push it into that stop, it positions it accurately in the same position every time. If you wanted to change the position of your workpiece on here, you'd simply just move these to a different position on the vacuum table. And if I turn on the vacuum pump back there, you can even probably see it go down. Now that thing, there's no way I could get that off, even pushing it away from the stops. It's extremely rigid, held on there. So nothing new there, except for the fact that we have repeat locating now. And I think we have some other products in the works that are provide similar functionality. You can see that thing raising up. So excited about those. And yeah, if you're interested, now's a good time to pick them up with the DAD for VAC discount, which is 15% off. Okay, so I think that takes us through the majority of the content we wanted to cover today. I would like to do a Q&A now, so if there's any questions that have come up in the chat, I see a few here, we'll get those answered. So Pat, what type pump is Jace using? This is our 17 CFM pump. We run our 17 on both of our 4x4 machines. Right now we run the 9 on our 48x32, but more than likely we'll upgrade that to a 17 as well. I love that product. I think it's one of our best offerings that we have for people in the CNC space. It's just, it's kind of a unicorn in the sense that it consumes 10 amps on 110 and produces 17 CFM and a very nice stable vacuum, very stable from a vibration perspective, doesn't run as hot. It's just a really great machine and something that I'm super fond of, and likely we'll develop more things around that platform in the future. It's a very, very clean, awesome product. And again, not a better time to buy that thing, that's for sure. So yeah, 17 CFM is what I'm using. What was the depth that you recommended cutting into the tile gasket? Great question, Brandon. So basically you want to cut through as minimally as possible while still getting a clean cut. I recommend 5/1000 of an inch, 0.005. Depending on your setup, your machine, what the capabilities are, you might need to adjust that a little bit deeper, maybe to 10 thou if you need to. But I think in your case, I think you should be able to hit 5 thou no problem, knowing the machine that you run. Yeah, I would say that should be a walk in the park. Again, just measure your stock thickness very accurately, and then probe Z where you measured for, the exact location where you actually took the thickness with calipers, and that should set you straight. Richard, how high do the stops sit above the table? Good question. I'm pretty sure it's a, you're gonna make me question myself now. Let me grab one. I believe it's a 1/4 inch, but I'm gonna measure for you really quick. 3/16 maybe? Yeah, so a little over an 1/8. Not much. A little over an 1/8 of an inch. How would you do a double-sided project? Great question, Dave. Depends on the project. Dave, really quick, hit us in the chat with what the project would be, and then I'll answer that because it depends on a lot of factors. How big is it? What's the material? There's a lot of things that come into consideration when you're talking about a given project. But essentially, one of my favorite things to do is to use a corner reference. That's pretty easy. So, actually, I have a demo I can show really quick. Yeah, let's run that. So I'm just I'll show you really quickly how to establish a corner reference on a Spoilboard. So if you remember, I have this piece of MDF with some, just a gasket square, a nested gasket square installed on it. And if I wanted to put material in the same position every time relative to that square, it'd be really nice to have some features in the Spoilboard so that I could, butt it up to a corner right there. So let me run this really quick, and I'll just drill 3 holes, put some pins in, and then I'll get a reference just the same way that I have a reference using those hard stops in the back right in the direct mounting case. So let me just turn that on. So turn this off, turn this on. That's on there. And then I'm going to bring the machine forward. So I'm just going to run a quick program that I have loaded already. I already have my Z heights set. Thanks for asking this, Richard. Is it Richard? I think it was. Load. And we'll drill these holes really quick. So just a quick drilling operation. And then what I'll do blow this off. And then I'm going to take 3 of these little dowel pins. Now, these could be, gosh, let me shut this off. These could be wood dowels, these could be plastic, but I like steel because of the precision of the grind. The diameter is extremely consistent. But I can just take these now, and I can put these around these holes. Just, whoops, they just slip right in. A lot of people are concerned about leakage if you do this, and I didn't go all the way through. I just went down about 3/16. And now I have this little reference that I can put material on and hold down. So let's take a closer look. So a really quick and easy drilling program. You say I have 2 pins that establish, a sort of a linear translation, and I butt the material up here. Oops, I sent that stuff flying. So, boom. Now I have a corner that I can use, and if I turn on the vacuum pump, I'm rigidly held. Shut it off. Release pressure, and the thing comes right off. So this gives me a stable reference, a corner that I can get back to repeatedly that allows me to machine one side. And then, if I have features relative to that position that I want again, flip it over and use that same corner reference, and I can get, very accurate location relative to the side one machining. So that's a very, very easy, common way to do things. Another way to do this would be if you had, say you had a part that has holes in it, or you wanted to, you didn't have a rectangular surface to work with. You didn't have a straight 90-degree corner. You don't necessarily need that, but It's nice to have a flat edge for this method, at least one. The other thing you could do is you could machine holes in the outer extents of your stock material and have the stock be oversized, larger than your finished part, and then drill some holes for flipping it, put pins in, then flip it over onto the pins for side 2, and start your machining process for side 2. So relatively, it feels relatively straightforward to me, but it doesn't mean it is. But the whole idea here is that you want to use a stable reference when you're flipping parts over to make sure that you can get back to the same position every single time that you do a flip, and maintain position relative to each other. So, okay, Dave, I was making bottle openers that were about 7 inches. So yeah, so I think I would probably go with either a dedicated fixture if you're going to make a lot of them. So use a fixture plate and some gasket, machine side 1, and then you can flip into a shallow recess and use a reference that's machined into the fixture. You could have oversized stock, like say you had a strip of hardwood and you have a bunch of these bottle openers in them. You can machine them all, leave it connected, and then do your flip and do it onto pins or a corner reference, and then profile them out on side 2. There's a few different ways you can do it, and it really comes down to what's the most efficient for your particular workflow and process. I like flipping into a recess. I like flipping onto pins. If you flip and you're going to use a corner reference, it's really nice to machine the opposing corner before you put that into your reference, so you have something stable to work off of, or you use the same corner on side 1 as side 2. Just make sure you're keeping in mind the stability of the references. If you can machine them prior to using it as a reference, pretty good. Can you drill holes in the black plastic sheets? So I'm assuming, Dave, that you mean the vacuum tables themselves. And if that's the question, the answer is yes. Any one of the squares on the top of the vacuum table, you can actually put dowel pin holes into them up to about 3/8 deep and have no performance impact on your product. So that can be a really nice thing to do too. We've had customers do that. They get their vacuum table, they download our DXF, they use that to install and make sure they know that position, that reference point that they use to install from. Usually I recommend using your home position on your machine just because it's the most stable. And then they take the DXF, they add in holes, and they drill them and then just put 1/4 inch dowels so they have a fence to work with. We've also had customers that use the locating pin holes in the top surface to create a fence. So you can have one strip of material that's going down sort of parallel to the Y direction, interfacing those 2 pinholes on the left side. And then you can have a recess that's half the thickness of the material, then have another piece that you overlap onto that recess, interfaces with that pin closest to 0, 0, and then goes across and interfaces with the other pinhole on the other side, creating a corner that you can use as a fence on top of the vacuum table. That's cool because you could do that on top of a Spoilboard too, but then again, you could just drill holes in the Spoilboard just like I showed. So lots of ways to skin the cat. But if you're looking to add reference to the vacuum table, either using these new little guys that I just showed is a really great way. Alternatively, you can add holes. If you're serious about doing that, please send us an email at info@airweights.com so that we can just give you an explicit instruction. There are a few areas I would recommend avoiding, just not because it would cause an issue, but just for safety, reliability sake. If you happen to go too deep or something, we'd want to make sure that you're putting them in ideal spots. Jeff, is there any concerns with very fine dust getting into the pump? Yes, there is concerns with that, Jeff, and that's why every single one of our AirWeights vacuum pumps ships with an inlet filter. So, in line right before the air gets drawn into the pump, there's a particulate filter that just knocks out anything that's coming in. It's very important that you take the time on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on what your workflow is like and how much use you have, to just check the filter bulb to make sure that there's not very much particulate in there. unscrew it, empty it out. On some of our pumps, it just pops right out. Other ones, it screws and unscrews. But take it, dump it in the trash can, blow it out, make sure it's clean. And you can also blow out the filter too, just to make sure that things aren't getting built up in there and it's actually passing air appropriately. It can clog if you just use it for a super heavy use. So, or if you don't empty it for a very long period of time. But yeah, absolutely use an inlet filter to make sure that you're not pulling particulate into the pump, because if it gets into the pumping mechanism, that's bad news. Tim, is the 500 pump enough to work with the MDF? Yes, it is. And I think you're referring to the 500 watt version. So that's our 5 CFM pump. And that works with our MDF full feature set up to 24 inches by 24 inches. To run the vacuum tables like you saw here on a 4x4 machine off a single vacuum source, I recommend our 17 CFM. And our 9 CFM, which sits between those two products, is good for our 24x48 or our 24x36 products. The 24x36 we just launched about a month ago. So yeah, it's totally possible. For our 16x16 system and our 24x24 system, the 5 CFM works awesome. Like I said, with MDF, it's all about the material and all about how much area you have to work with, and making sure that you're accounting for leaks as best you can. But for general projects, as long as you're adhering to the guidelines that we outlined earlier, works great. TP, do you upcut? Okay. Do upcut bits work well with AirWeights, or do you recommend downcut or other? Good question. Generally, our work holding strength is pretty darn good, and the relative force that you get from an upcut bit spinning at 18,000 RPMs, I mean, it's not a very substantial amount of force lifting relative to the downforce from vacuum work holding. So I think the answer that I would like to suggest is use the bit that's right for your project. Don't modify your work holding approach to account for our system. Our system should work for you regardless of the tool you're using, as long as you're using reasonable feeds and speeds and not like, something that's way too aggressive. As long as you're using reasonable speeds and feeds, use the tool that you would use for your project regardless of the work holding method. If you're doing something really delicate and intricate, like if you're doing tiny little detail parts, like we've had people do keychains or 2-inch diameter aluminum circles or things like that, modifying your approach, because there's not really another good way to hold that stuff, so that you can use vacuum work holding is a good way to go. And in that case, yeah, I would probably go downcut. But I think, again, I think the relative forces are low, and I think you should try with what you think will lead to the best results for your project, and then back off from there, rather than going in with the anticipation of it failing. All right, Melvin, does this setup work vertically? Are there any wall-mounted 1F makers out there running AirWeights? Great question. There are 1F there are 1F wall-mounted users out there running AirWeights. There's a pretty popular guy named Pat Lapp that's actually setting up his system right now. He'll have 4 16x16s on his woodworker that's wall-mounted. We have a customer in the UK that has our slat system wall-mounted on their Journeyman. So yeah, it does work vertically. It's not gravity dependent. We're talking about air pressure here. And whether it's on the side or down or up or whatever, it still works. I mean, one of our guys, the homies Hamilton, he put it on the ceiling and was hanging weights off it. So it's totally a thing, and that's one of the benefits, is that you're kind of you're not really dependent on direction so much. And I would love to see more wall-mounted users out there, because I think it is a really major benefit for that particular use case. All right, Brandon, can you use plugs in the fixture table to have multiple fixture zones? If so, what width should the hole be cut to reuse the plugs that the base AirWeights table uses? Good question. The answer is yes. And the answer to the diameter of the hole is about 3/8. So try 3/8, and then if you need to size up from there, go from there. But I think 3/8 will work pretty good for you, 0.375. The other thing that works really well is just blue tape. So if it's a flat surface, right around where your hole is, and you're using onboard gasket, just on top of the fixture, you can take some painter's tape and just cover the hole and it seals just fine. But if you want to use the plugs, you can. The thing I worry about with that I've run into in my own processes is if you're doing a lot of machining across the fixture and your dust boot is moving over the plugs all the time, it can knock the plug loose and you lose vacuum, and that's a bad situation. So I prefer a different approach. If you can do it, just a little bit of tape over the hole, and that should be nice and flush and not get torn up by your dust boot. If you're doing machining in a separate location, say you had side 1 on one side of the fixture and you flip over to side 2 and there's no risk of the dust boot hitting, you're fine. But just keep that in mind that those plugs can get knocked loose by your dust boot if it happens to be going over the same area.
I think that's all the questions, unless anybody has any last minute questions they want to get in.
All right. Going once? Going twice? All right, I think we're good. So yeah, we're going to do our giveaway now. All right, hold on. One more question. What about vertical as in 90 degrees on the front edge of a machine? Would the forces like burping release the panel? Good question, Monty. If you're doing like on-end joinery for work holding, making tenons or something like that, just be a little bit more conservative with your feed rates. As long as you're not ramming the tool into the material at super high speed, which I don't think you would with that kind of work, I think you should be fine. It's a really, really good application for vacuum and something that we've thought about a lot internally developing products for. But yeah, you should definitely take a little bit more conservative approach, just because of the fact that you're pulling in the direction that can burp the seal. And if you're doing that, I would highly recommend using either direct mount or a fixture plate and not using a spoil board or a tile gasket. So there's your answer.
Well, so, we could probably, if anyone has any more questions, send them in. And as you're doing that, in the chat, you can type #VAC4Dad to enter our giveaway. We're giving away a 24x24 system with the 5 CFM pump. So get your entries in and we'll give you guys some time to do that. And feel free to add any more questions if they come up.
The odds are good right now. The odds are very good. Yeah, well, I was just telling Kate earlier, like I love doing these giveaways because well, first of all, I love just giving stuff away to people and stoking them out, making them happy. And I hope that this goes to somebody who really needs it and that would, really love using it. But I just wonder when it's going to catch on that like the odds are extremely good to win a vacuum sale. I'm surprised that more people aren't attending because it's like a $750 value and a huge capability added to your machine. And I guess it just hasn't caught on yet. So yeah, I mean, what are we at? 30 entries? That's pretty darn good odds. Hopefully more and more people catch on.
I think we have another question. Do you feel MDF spoil boards work close to as well as the ones you sell?
It is MDF. And I think if you can find the right density, it will work just as well. Something about Medex is pretty special. The other thing that I didn't mention, it is a NAF product, so there's no added formaldehyde, which is kind of cool if you're into woodworking and you do a lot of stuff with wood and inhale particulate all the time. I think basically, health and safety is an important thing, and no added formaldehyde is a good bonus. Also, just something about the consistency of the material and how it's made, it really does an incredible job. I think that if you find the right density, though, it will work just as well. It all comes down to the physics of how the air moves through the material. And if you can find 48 pound per cubic foot, you're good. Yeah, medium density, that's right. Yeah, it's actually on the border of medium. Like you go any more and you get into HDF. But yeah, medium is where it's at. Oh my gosh, some of these comments. How do you spell that MDF brand? Medex, M-E-D as in David, E-X. And it's from Roseburg Forest Products. And I think it's, I want to say it's on our website. If not, we'll add a link to our instructions to that brand. But yeah, Medex MDF, there you go. What is our entry total here?
We're at 33.
Whoo, man, someone's about to win. That is awesome. Back for Melvin. Yeah, Melvin. All right. What do you think, Kate? Has it moved at all?
No, we're kind of sitting at 33. I think we should do it.
33. Oh, Barry Lang grew up in Roseburg. That's awesome. Yeah, you should be able to get some MDF there. All right, going once, going twice. Any more dads out there looking to win a vacuum table? No, sold. Okay, let's do it. Oh, man. Tim! Awesome. That's great. All right, Kate, what does Tim need to do to claim his prize?
Tim needs to email us at info@airweights.com, and in the subject line, just say that you were the giveaway winner, and we'll get you hooked up.
Yeah, so what you get in that kit, Tim, is a 24 by 24 AirWeights vacuum table, a 5 CFM pump, all the hardware you need, interconnects, everything, and it's basically everything you need to get set up in a direct work holding method, just like we showed with those repeat stops back there in the back right. And you'll be off to the races cutting. If you have any questions, please include them in your email, and we'll work with you to get this shipped out. Should be able to get it out this week. And yeah, thank you so much for attending, and it's a deserving win. I hope that you get good use out of it. So, the other thing I should say, Tim, if there's another setup that is more optimal for your machine, your configuration, whatever it is, just let us know, and we'll work with you to add the value of that system to a different order. You basically just have credit. So, whatever you want to do within the bounds of our product line, just let us know, and that'll stand for any of our winners. So, yeah, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you all for entering. I do want to remind everybody just one more time, we do have a sale running. If you didn't win, there's very rarely a better time to pick up a vacuum table than when we're running these sales. So 15% off now through next Monday, all the way until Monday at midnight, just so if you forget, I got your back. You're a dad, I got you. And if you're busy with the kids, it's all good. Next Monday at midnight, the sale ends, 15% off. And the code is VAC4DAD, VAC number 4, DAD. Please enter that in your the discount when you check out. And yeah, we hope you guys can pick up some good equipment and get to cutting in a way that's a little bit more fun. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Congratulations, Tim. If you have not liked any of our videos or subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. Really appreciate that. We'll be doing more of these live streams. We're trying to do it on a sort of a monthly cadence just to keep up with new products, what we have to offer, continue to educate. If there's topics that you'd like to see, please send us an email at info@airweights, and we'll address those in our live streams, or we'll do a dedicated YouTube video on them if there's enough interest. And if you would like to see the most up-to-date product releases that we have, the very first place that people find out about new products that we offer is our email list. So if you go to our website and scroll to the bottom, you can subscribe to our email list and get all of our emails and announcements about upcoming live streams or new products that are announced. We don't spam anybody. We just genuinely share things that we think people who are subscribed might be interested to know. And I highly recommend you do so before the rest of this year, because we have some exciting things in store. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Take care.